Robert Guiscard was a Norman adventurer conspicuous in the conquest of southern Italy and Sicily. Robert was born into the Hauteville family in Normandy, went on to become Count of Apulia and Calabria, and then Duke of Apulia and Calabria and Duke of Sicily. His sobriquet, in contemporary Latin Viscardus and Old French Viscart, is often rendered the resourceful, the cunning, the wily, the fox, or the weasel. In Italian sources he is often Roberto il Guiscardo or Roberto del Tavilla. Background: from 999 to 1042 the Normans in Italy, coming first as pilgrims, were mainly mercenaries serving at various times the Byzantines and a number of Lombard nobles. The first of the independent Norman lords was Rainulf Drengert, who established himself in the fortress of Aversa, becoming Count of Aversa and Duke of Gaeta. In 1038 there arrived William Ironarm and Drogo, the two eldest sons of Tancred of Hauteville, a petty noble of the Cotentin in Normandy. The two joined in the revolt of the Lombards against Byzantine control of Apulia. By 1040 the Byzantines had lost most of that province. In 1042 Melfi was chosen as the Norman capital, and in September of that year the Normans elected as their Count William Ironarm, who was succeeded in turn by his brothers Drogo, Comes Normanorum Totius Apuliae Calabri, and Humphrey, who arrived about 1044. Early years. Robert Guiscard was the sixth son of Tancred of Hauteville and eldest by his second wife Fresinde. According to the Byzantine historian Anna Komnena, he left Normandy with only 5 mounted riders and 30 followers on foot. Upon arriving in Langobardia in 1047, he became the chief of a roving robber band. Anna Komnena also leaves a physical description of Guiscard. This Robert was Norman by birth, of obscure origins, with an overbearing character and a thoroughly villainous mind. He was a brave fighter, very cunning in his assaults on the wealth and power of great men, in achieving his aims absolutely inexorable, diverting criticism by incontrovertible argument. He was a man of immense stature, surpassing even the biggest men. He had a ruddy complexion, fair hair, broad shoulders, eyes that all but shot out sparks of fire. In a well-built man one looks for breadth here and slimness there, in him all was admirably well-proportioned and elegant. Homer remarked of Achilles that when he shouted his hearers had the impression of a multitude in uproar, but Robert's bellow, so they say, put tens of thousands to flight. Lands were scarce in Apulia at the time, and the roving Guiscard could not expect any grant from Drogo, then reigning, for Humphrey had just received his own county of Lavello. Guiscard soon joined Prince Pandolf IV of Capua in his ceaseless wars with Prince Guimar IV of Salerno. The next year, however, Guiscard left Pandolf, according to a Martis of Monte Cassino, because Pandolf reneged on a promise of a castle in his daughter's hand. Guiscard returned to his brother Drogo and asked to be granted a fief. Drogo, who had just finished campaigning in Calabria, gave Guiscard command of the fortress of Scriblar. Dissatisfied with this position, Guiscard moved to the castle of San Marco Argentino. During his time in Calabria, Guiscard married his first wife, Albareda de Macon, known in Italy as Albareda of Buonalbergo. She was the daughter of Reginald I, Count of Burgundy, also known as Renaud de Macon, Baron of Buonalbergo, and Gerard of Buonalbergo, and his wife Alice of Normandy. Guiscard soon rose to distinction. The Lombards turned against their erstwhile allies, and Pope Leo IX determined to expel the Norman freebooters. His army was defeated, however, at the Battle of Civitate Sulphutor in 1053 by the Normans, united under Humphrey. Humphrey commanded the centre against the Pope's Swabian troops. Early in the battle Count Richard of Aversa, commanding the right van, put the Lombards to flight and chased him down, then returned to help rout the Swabians. Guiscard had come all the way from Calabria to command the left. His troops were held in reserve until, seeing Humphrey's forces ineffectually charging the Pope's centre, He called up his father-in-law's reinforcements and joined the fray, distinguishing himself personally, even being dismounted and remounting again 3 separate times, according to William of Apulia. Honoured for his actions at Civitate, Guiscard succeeded Humphrey as Count of Apulia in 1057, over his elder half-brother Geoffrey. In company with Roger, his youngest brother, Guiscard carried on the conquest of Apulia and Calabria, while Richard conquered the Principality of Capua. Rule. Soon after his succession, probably in 1058, Guiscard separated from his wife Albareda because they were related within the prohibited degrees. Shortly after, he married Sicilian, the sister of Gisulf II of Salerno, Guimar's successor. In return for giving him his sister's hand, Gisulf demanded that Guiscard destroy 2 castles of his brother William, Count of the Principate, which had encroached on Gisulf's territory. The reformist papacy, at odds with the Holy Roman Emperor and the Roman nobility itself, resolved to recognize the Normans and secure them as allies. Therefore, at the Council of Melfi, on 23 August 1059, Pope Nicholas II invested Guiscard as Duke of Apulia, Calabria, and Sicily. Guiscard, now, by the grace of God and Saint Peter, Duke of Apulia and Calabria, and, if either aid me, future Lord of Sicily, agreed to hold his titles and lands by annual rent of the Holy See and to maintain its cause. In the next 20 years he undertook a series of conquests, winning his Sicilian dukedom, subjection of Calabria. At the time of the opening of the Melfitan Council in June, Guiscard had been leading an army in Calabria, the first strong attempt to subjugate that Byzantine province since the campaigns of Iran with Guimar. After attending the synod for his investiture, Guiscard returned to Calabria, where his army was besieging Cariati. After his arrival, Cariati submitted and, before winter was out, Rossano and Geraci followed. Only Reggio was left in Byzantine hands when Guiscard returned to Apulia. In Apulia, he worked to remove the Byzantine garrisons from Taranto and Brindisi, before, largely in preparation for his planned Sicilian expedition, he returned again to Calabria, where Roger was waiting with siege engines. The fall of Reggio, after a long and arduous siege, and the subsequent capitulation of Silla, an island citadel to which the Reggian garrison had fled, opened up the way to Sicily. Roger first led a tiny force to attack Messina but was repulsed easily by the Saracen garrison. The large invading force that could have been expected did not materialize, for Guiscard was recalled by a new Byzantine army, sent by Constantine X Ducas, ravaging Apulia. In January 1061, Melfi itself was under siege, and Roger too was recalled. But the full weight of Guiscard's forces forced the Byzantines to retreat, and by May Apulia was calm. Sicilian campaigns. Guiscard invaded Sicily with his brother Roger, capturing Messina in 1061 with comparable ease. Roger's men landed unsighted during the night and surprised the Saracen army in the morning, while Guiscard's troops landed unopposed and found Messina abandoned. Guiscard immediately fortified Messina and allied himself with Ibn at-Timnar, one of the rival emirs of Sicily, against Ibn al-Hawis, another emir. The armies of Guiscard, his brother, and his Muslim friend marched into central Sicily by way of Rametta, which had remained loyal to al-Timnar. Guiscard assaulted the town of Centuripa, but resistance was strong, and he moved on. Paterno fell, and Guiscard brought his army to Enna, a formidable fortress. The Saracens sallied forth and were defeated, but Enna itself did not fall. Guiscard turned back, leaving a fortress at San Marco di Lunzio, named after his first stronghold in Calabria. He returned to Apulia with Sicilian for Christmas. He returned in 1064, but bypassed Enna, making straight for Palermo. His campsite was infested with tarantulas, however, and had to be abandoned. The campaign was unsuccessful, though a later campaign, in 1072, saw Palermo fall, and for the rest of Sicily it was only then a matter of time. As a result of his Sicilian campaign, Guiscard was referred to as Black Shirt Robert because throughout the campaign he wore elegant clothing with imported dyes that ran together, resulting in black clothing. Against the Byzantines, Bari was reduced in April 1071, and Byzantine forces were finally ousted from southern Italy. The territory around Salerno was already held by Guiscard, and in December 1076 he took the city, expelling its Lombard prince Gisulf, whose sister Sicilian he had married. The Norman attacks on Benevento, a papal fief, alarmed and angered Pope Gregory VII. Pressured by the Emperor Henry IV, Gregory VII turned again to the Normans, and at Sepana in June 1080, he re-invested Guiscard, securing him also in the southern Abruzzi, while reserving Salerno. In his last enterprise, Guiscard mounted an attack on the Byzantine Empire, taking up the cause of Michael VII, who had been deposed in 1078 and to whose son Guiscard's daughter had been betrothed. He sailed with 16,000 men, including 1,300 Norman knights, against the empire in May 1081. He defeated Emperor Alexius I Comnenus at the Battle of Dyrrhachium in October 1081, and by February 1082 he had occupied Corfu and Durazzo. He was recalled to the aid of Gregory VII, however, who was besieged in Castel Sant'Angelo by Henry IV, in June 1083. Also in 1083, Guiscard destroyed the town of Cannae, leaving only the cathedral and bishop's residence. Guiscard was allied to Kingdom of Duclia and Constantine Bodin. In 1081 he married his daughter Jacinta to Bodin in Bari. In May 1084, Guiscard marched north with 36,000 men, entered Rome, and forced Henry to retire. A rebellion, or seditious tumult, of the citizens led to a 3-day sack of the city, after which Guiscard escorted the Pope to Rome. Guiscard's son Bohemond, for a time master of Thessaly, had now lost the Byzantine conquests. Guiscard returned with 150 ships to restore them, and he occupied Corfu and Cephalonia with the help of Ragusa and the Dalmatian cities. On 17 July 1085, Guiscard died of fever at Athera, north of Lixouri, along with 500 Norman knights. He was buried in the Hauteville family mausoleum of the Abbey of the Santa Simitronita at Venosa. The town of Fiscardo on Cephalonia is named after him. Guiscard was succeeded by Roger Borsa, his son by Sicilian, as Bohemond, his son by an earlier wife Alboada de Macon, was set aside. Guiscard left 2 younger sons, Guy, Duke of Amalfi, and Robert Scalia, neither of whom made any trouble for their elder brothers. At his death, Guiscard was Duke of Apulia and Calabria, Prince of Salerno, and Suzerain of Sicily. His successes had been due not only to his great qualities but to the entente with the Papal See. He created and enforced a strong ducal power, which was nevertheless met by many baronial revolts, including one in 1078, when he demanded from the Apulian vassals an aid on the betrothal of his daughter. In conquering such wide territories he had little time to organize them internally. In the history of the Norman Kingdom of Italy, Guiscard remains essentially the hero and founder, though his career ended in something of a dead end, while his nephew Roger II was the statesman and organizer. Religion. Due to his conquest of Calabria and Sicily, Guiscard was instrumental in bringing Latin Christianity to an area that had historically followed the Byzantine Rite. Guiscard laid the foundation of the Salerno Cathedral and of a Norman monastery at Santa Eufemia in Calabria. This latter monastery, famous for its choir, began as a community of 11 monks from St. Evroul in Normandy under the abbot Robert de Grantmesnil. Although his relationship with the Pope was rocky, Guiscard preferred to be on good terms with the papacy, and he made a gesture of abandoning his first wife in response to church law. While the popes were often fearful of his growing power, they preferred the strong and independent hand of a Catholic Norman to the rule of a Byzantine Greek. Guiscard received his investment with Sicily at the hands of Pope Nicholas II, who feared the opposition of the Holy Roman Emperor to the papal reforms more. Guiscard supported the reforms, coming to the rescue of a besieged Pope Gregory VII, who had once excommunicated him for encroaching on the territory of the Papal States. After the Great Schism of 1054, the polarized religious atmosphere served to strengthen Guiscard's alliance with papal forces, resulting in a formidable papal Norman opposition to the Eastern Empire. In literature, in the Divine Comedy, Dante sees Guiscard's spirit in the heaven of Mars, along with other warriors of the faith, who exemplify the cardinal virtue of fortitude. In the Inferno, Dante describes Guiscard's enemies as a field of mutilated shades stretching out to the horizon. Guiscard was the protagonist of Kleist's verse drama Robert Guiscard, incomplete at the author's death. Historical fiction novels covering the early years of the dynasty, from the arrival of the brothers in Italy to the conquest of Sicily, is covered in Jack Ludlow's trilogy Mercenaries, Warriors and Conquest. Marriage and issue. Married in 1051 to Albreda of Buon-Albergo and had Bohemond. Emma, married to Oddo the Good Marquis. Married in 1058 or 1059 to Sichel Guitar and had Matilda, married Ramon Berenguer II, Count of Barcelona. Roger Borsa. Mabile, married to William de Grant-Mesnil. Gersant, married to Hugh V of Maine, repudiated. Robert Scalia. Guy, Duke of Amalfi. Sibylla, married to Eblida Ramarupt, 4th Count of Rusai and had 8 children. Olympias, betrothed to Constantine Ducas, son of Michael VII in August 1074, contract broken off in 1078.